My phone will not stop ringing. I have 8 listings on the MLS right now, Josh, and it's going absolutely crazy. I listed a property yesterday at like 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and before noon today, I had a full price offer that I was communicating with my seller, and we're accepting. It's just
That's great.
It's absolutely crazy what's going on right now.
Yeah, man.
And hello and welcome, everybody. This is the Build and Grow with Real Estate Show. My name is Judah Hoover, and that guy right over there, I almost pointed back there. That guy right over there is Josh Weidman. And we come to you every day with the news and information you need and the content you need to be a better realtor, to be a better real estate investor, to be a better landlord, be a better flipper, and be a better service provider to the real estate industry. I come at this from the perspective of a long-time real estate investor and long-time lender and a realtor. Josh comes at this from the perspective of somebody who is a hard money lender and a long-time investor as well. And on Friday, we do the news roundup of the week. So, Slow News Week, sunshine.
Yeah, nothing happened. No, nothing to report.
Nothing to report. So we're just going to sign off and go from there.
That's right. So, Judah, every week we say this. Like, I started jokingly calling this our end of the world episode, every Friday. And, I think we should just call it Sunshine and Rainbows episode. Maybe that'll change the news.
That will change the news. It'll jinx it. Absolutely.
I'd love to see that. So we're going to start off with our unemployment numbers. We are holding steady at 1 million.
Right.
So we've got some really interesting stuff going on right now. We've got over 1 million. Just about 1 million.
I like that we're doing the crawl now for this as opposed to the slides, because when we do the slides, it makes our two incredibly handsome faces smaller. And I think that what people tune into this show for is looking at your face and looking at my face.
Our smiling faces. I know it.
I think that's what it is.
All right. So let's look at this. So we've got today unemployment news. As of 8/22, 1 million new unemployment claims, continued claims at 14.5 million. That's some big numbers. I could not find a hard number on what that represented as a percentage of the population, but it's over 10%. I would say it's like 10.3 to maybe even 11%, whatever. It's kind of interesting. We got some mixed numbers on jobs and things like that we'll get into in a minute. But one nice thing is the Pennsylvania
is now eligible for the $300. Yes.
Yeah. Now that thanks to Mr. Trump, or President Trump, $300 extra in that unemployment payment. So next, let's get into housing data. So this is some kind of cool information. I was reading the National Association of Realtors, and they put out some numbers talking about year-over-year numbers as far as the listing market, right?
Right.
Year-over-year, ending last week, August 22nd, first number is the total listings. 1/3 lower than a year ago. I mean, it's not surprising, but that's a big number.
Yeah.
Days on market down 9 days. And the interesting thing about this is just last week, it was only down 4 days. So now we're down 9 days year over year. Median listing price is up 10.3%. That's insane. That's a huge...
Right. So total listings dipped 1/3, but we also have to remember that we lost 5 months. Are we going to call it 4 months? What are we going to say? We were shut down for 4 or 5 months there, and maybe that's a difference between not every state was shut down as hard as Pennsylvania was and New York was, but we were really shut down there for a while.
Well, it's true. I mean, there was a lot of lockdowns. True, but now that things are back up and going, we've got really nice new listings, and one downside here is right now I read on Forbes. There's the number of the number of 90-day lates in July.
NOD, notice the defaults.
exactly. Increased by 20% over June. That represents 376,000 people, additional people, from
that
the
are
month.
90 days late on their mortgage. And when you're 90 days late, if you're ever, as soon as you miss a mortgage, as soon as you miss a rent payment, you have a late fee at 5 days, and your landlord can start filing for eviction really right away. But sometimes they usually wait 15 or 20 days or something like that. By and large, mortgage companies don't file for eviction or foreclosure until you're 90 days. And pretty much universally, they file once you get to 90 days. So
even if they don't file, it's getting handed to an attorney. So if you're at 89 days, make a payment to make sure that it doesn't get to 90, because you're going to get a bill for an extra $10,000 or $15,000 immediately as soon as that,
that's what you're right. Whether it's filed or not, they're starting to do legal actions and things like that. So the bottom line is, it's very hard to get out of a 90-day. And I spent a lot of time in the mortgage industry. I know a lot of lenders that in their underwriting guidelines, they code a 90-day late as the same thing as a foreclosure. So yeah, you really tracking those 90-day delinquencies is a big metrics. And the fact that it spiked last month is not at all a good thing.
There we go. All right, moving on.
But also, let's remember, hold on here. Let's also not forget that, that data comes from filings, is usually where that comes from. And they because you have to file a notice of default, and that's public record. So a bunch of mortgage companies probably just held off on filing. Like, I'm getting ready to file more evictions than I've ever filed ever in my life. But it's really just 3 months worth of evictions. It's actually not that much more. It's surprisingly not that much more, but it's just that it's 3 months worth of pent up evictions that I'm filing.
Okay. I'll take that, but on the flip side, you could also say, because if we're looking at 90-day defaults, because we had this forbearance, and because we've had these stops of foreclosure filings, we could also be looking at a lot of ghosted defaults. I don't know. We'll see.
Yep.
We'll see. That's the bottom line. We'll see what happens. All right. So adjusted economic numbers. We're not going to be downers all day, I promise. There's some really awesome news that's happening here. But there were some adjusted numbers for July here, or for the second quarter. Looks like GDP, it had the largest drop in history to 31.7%. It retracted by 31.7%. And 227 billion of that were in corporate profits that just disappeared. Again, this is during the shutdowns, pretty much expected. The nice news is that it's expected that this is going to recover in the third quarter, and there are a lot of indicators that seem to.
That's not a very big revision up. 31.7. What was the initial reading?
It was actually it was 32.4 is what.
They lowered it. Oh yeah, okay. It's right, still, they were thinking it was going to be 33 to 35, and so it's gotten a little. So how they do these numbers is they do an initial reading and say what it is, and then later they come back and revise it up or down with what the actual official reading is. And usually people just talk about what the initial reading is. So it's close. If we were moving that number by a 1 percentage point, and we're talking about 2 to 3 points or 5 or 6 points plus or negative, that would be a big deal. But we're still in the same ballpark with our final read.
That's right. All right, business. So I was watching something on CNBC about the inequality between small and large businesses, and what's very interesting. They brought up a couple points that I didn't even think of. Larger businesses, they've already proven themselves, right? Like, they've already gone through. I read one time that in over the first 5 years of a business, you have like an 80% chance of failure. And then the next 5 years, you have another 80% chance of failure. So if you get through that 10-year period and you're still in business, you probably have a pretty solid.
You did something right to get there.
Yeah. However, what we're seeing right now is that there's twice the chance of failure right now for companies with less than 500 employees. And I don't think anybody would look at a company with, 350 employees and say, hey, they're a pretty small business. That's a pretty big employer.
Right.
They got a big payroll. They've got likely big revenue, but there's twice the chance of failure for those companies as opposed to companies over 500 employees. And, there's a couple, it seems like COVID, when a lot of the shutdowns were happening, a lot of the companies that were not part of that smaller business were exempted from a lot of the shutdowns. They were able to find workarounds. You look at a company like Walmart. I have so much respect for the way they handled the shutdowns. I mean, I don't know if you remember this, but like before any of the grocery stores or anybody was doing anything, before the masks were mandatory, you couldn't go in their store without a mask. Right. And then they made the lanes one way. They set up their checkouts to make sure people were distancing and all that kind of stuff. This is before any government entities or anybody really.
I have to take your word for it, Josh, because I don't shop at Walmart.
God forbid. That's right. You live in Lancaster. You have options. Like, I gotta drive 25 minutes in any direction.
I'm teasing. I love Walmart. It's a great. Do you think people understand and get the false bravado? Do they, or do I just come across as a jerk? I hope that people get it.
Look, we know you're a jerk. It's okay.
Right. So yeah, I think that what being a big business allows you to do, back to seriousness, is it allows you to pivot, right? Yeah. So I saw this with some restaurants on a smaller scale. There were some restaurants that were just closed and couldn't do anything. But there was one restaurant, one of my favorite Chinese restaurants. They were closed for 5 to 7 days, and then they walled off their dining room area. They set up a little booth, and they were the first to be able to pivot very aggressively to a takeout model. And now a lot of restaurants have pivoted to that takeout model, and a lot more are doing that. But it's one of those things that you saw bigger, more well-heeled businesses be able to do.
Well, and so in addition to that, one of the other points that came out of this that I thought was really interesting too is that larger companies were able to get different types of financing that were much cheaper and much more aggressive to meet their needs than smaller businesses. And it makes a lot of sense. But what you saw here during the shutdowns was a lot of these larger companies, they took market share. They expanded, they reached out, and they saw this, the saying, don't let a controversy or don't let any
never let a crisis go to waste.
Never let a crisis go to waste. Exactly. And they took advantage of that. So, it's kind of an interesting dynamic of what we're seeing right now. Small businesses in trouble. Some of the larger businesses are growing and being really profitable. You see, insane increases in companies like Amazon and Tesla and Apple in their stock values. So, interesting things are coming. All right. We've got some more bad news. We've got hurricanes. We've got unemployment. We got a presidential election.
Yeah, well, but I have a joke about the hurricane, but never mind.
Yeah. So Hurricane Laura hit land in Texas yesterday. It destroyed a ton of Louisiana and Texas, killed at least 6 people. It's really a travesty, and our thoughts and prayers go out to those people.
Did you see the Weather Channel video of it? I'll have to send you. There's this Weather Channel video of this woman trying to stand in a Category 4 hurricane, which usually Category 4 hurricanes don't hit land. By the time they get there, they're downgraded to a Category 2 or 3, but they've still got that giant seawall that they do the flooding and everything like that. Yeah. This was I will have to send you this footage because it was crazy.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Man. I mean, it's really it's amazing how strong wind and water are. You don't think, you go and you fill up your glass full of water, you take a drink, you don't even think anything of it.
Right.
And then you're standing in the ocean when it's, choppy. I don't know if you've ever been down to North Carolina, but like in the Outer Banks, those waves are dangerous.
It's choppy. It's pretty crazy. One of my favorite lines is from comedian Ron White, who says, "It's not that the wind is blowing, it's what the wind is blowing."
Yeah. Right, there you go. I mean, and you think of all the projectiles and things that fly through the air and could hit you. I mean, it's pretty wild.
Right.
All right. So are we going
to talk about the Fed? When do we talk about the Fed?
Yeah, please jump in.
All right. So Fed had their is it Jackson Hole? Where do they have their? I think it's Jackson Hole. They have an annual symposium. The Fed gets together with different policy wonks, different major Fed leaders, business leaders, and billionaires and stuff like that. It's such a giant, big meeting and cabal, and it's very some of it's very secretive. What's funny is it's a meeting where they get together and talk about monetary policy, which arguably is more important in some ways than political policy. And it's one of those things that kind of feeds the Bilderberg conspiracy theory, that the Rothschilds are running the world, and that there's this shadow government, that there may or may not be a shadow government running the world. Josh and I have different opinions on that. But this is one of those meetings that let people believe that there is a shadow government running the world. Anyway, the point is that just happened. The Fed came out and said, you know what, for the longest time, our guiding principle has been X, and now our guiding principle is going to be Y. And that's crazy, because like stocks and bonds go up and down. You know what I mean? But stocks go up and down, but the bond market and monetary policy is supposed to be so much more stable, so much more steady, that when they make a huge shift, it's very noteworthy and very, very news appropriate. So what they've decided is their target rate for inflation, because deflation is a bad thing. So the Fed wants there to be a little bit of inflation, and their target rate has always been about 2%.
Yeah.
Because if you have deflation, that's bad. Like this calculator costs $1 today. Tomorrow it's going to be $1.50. Well, if it costs $1 today, but tomorrow it costs 75 cents, guess what that means? That means we don't buy the calculator today. So deflation is like devastating to economies. Everyone talks about how bad inflation is, and hyperinflation is definitely a problem, but a little bit of inflation is actually good for economies. The Fed has been having a hard time sparking the inflation that we need for all kinds of boring reasons that I won't get into, but I would love to. It has to do with credit default swaps and monetary trenches and things like that we won't get into. And what happens, what they've decided to do is have a 2% average inflation is now what they're shooting for.
Right.
Translation, they're going to be okay because we've run under 2% for about 10 years. They're going to be okay if we run at a 3 to 5% inflation. The Fed might be trying to juice the economy to have a 3 to 5% inflation for the next 10 years. Now, here's the problem. When has the government ever been successful at anything? When has the government ever done anything good? We're good at bombing people. We're good at screwing stuff up, whether intentionally or unintentionally. But the Fed, the government doesn't do very much good its first time around. So myself and a number of other people are concerned that they might overbake the cake, and we might end up with 7, 8, 9, 10, 11% inflation. So
incidentally, what's the increase in listing values? It's 10.3% year over year.
Yeah.
There's more obviously to it than the value of money, but when you pump $5-6 trillion into the economy, it's going to have an impact, and it's going to cause asset values to go up.
Right. So that's the thing, is so the intrinsic value of real estate is going to stay the same if it adjusted for inflation. You know what I mean? So real estate's going up in value naturally, but then also with the inflationary value of real estate. So real estate's going to be going up for two reasons. Just like gold appears to go up in value. but it
Right.
actually, stays the same. Real estate does go up in value, but it also appears to go up in value. The point is, now's the time to buy real estate. And I'm not saying that as a realtor. I'm just saying, like, there's a lot of people who are going to be reading this and saying now's the time to buy real estate, and we're already in a tight real estate market with values going up. The Fed's decisions are only going to continue to drive real estate prices higher.
So I'm going to agree with you on buying real estate now, but I think that there is an intrinsic.
Jana is right, by the way. There is no dividend on gold. Gold is also very difficult to lever. Gold never paid me a rent check or a dividend. You know what I mean? There's 10% of your assets should be in physical gold that you can touch. You should not have much more than that.
All right. So back to the conversation about real estate during this market, right? The only way that this works with a high inflation rate,
right,
is if even at a 4 or 5 or 6% inflation rate, that's not nothing. And the only way real estate can continue to keep that value is if wages increase as well, because then you can charge more for rent, and it's more of a percentage game, as opposed to a situation where we've got 10% increase. And actually, the stock market's a great example. If the price of those assets goes up 10%, you're not trying to collect from a tenant to underpin that investment. Whereas with a cash flowing asset, if you can't increase the rents 10%, you're not going to cash flow. It's not going to be a good deal. So right. I mean, it's just
hold on. Jana is really scared that I'm telling people to buy gold. The only reason I bring up gold is because whenever you mention inflation, people start to say buy gold right afterwards. So I'm just and as inflation goes up, real estate values go up and gold goes up and everything like that. So I'm just talking about that for comparison's sake. Yes, inflation also will hopefully lead to higher wages. And I think, here's my conspiracy theorist, I think that the Democratic Party in America is pushing for a higher unemployment or a higher minimum wage, because it will spark what's called wage-based inflation. And it's another way that we can keep the economy inflating. And in order for Social Security not to be a concern and not to be a problem, is if inflation makes those bills go away. And we need inflation to have entitlement spending. You can't have entitlement spending without inflation. And Democrats like entitlement spending, for good or bad. And so if you
Republicans do too. Unfortunately.
Okay, great. But if those types of programs were to become problematic budgetarily wise, it would be the Republicans who would seek to cut them, and the Democrats are looking to save them. So in order to save those programs and also be able to sell more of them for good or nefarious reasons, whatever the case may be, you can decide that on your own. They need to have inflation, and in order to have inflation, that one of the ways they're hoping to spark that is by wage-based inflation, by raising the minimum wage.
So I have a news story that I want to bring up here. That
Elon Musk?
No. Oh, jogged in my brain, and it's not on our list. But I just remembered this. So what made me think of it is Bitcoin. I was looking up the price of Bitcoin, and right now Bitcoin's about $11,400.
$11.04.
I'll take a bunch. No, but last week I think it was topping 16,000. Here's what's really interesting. Something that happened over the last week: the largest dark web market where you can buy drugs and other nefarious things online.
Where you can buy drugs and other nefarious things online, Josh Weidman.
That's not me.
All right. Okay.
Here's the news story. It disappeared. It totally disappeared. Now, that means one of two things. One, it was shut down by the government. And if so, how the heck did they, to crack the code? But what people are thinking is the escrow deposits that they were taking, hey, you have a nefarious drug market. They just disappeared. And they took.
So you're saying the criminals weren't trustworthy?
I know. That's criminals doing criminal things. It's insane. But that was pretty big news because what the heck was it called? It was the spice, not spice market, but
I wouldn't know, Josh Weidman.
Oh, come on.
I wouldn't know.
Seen the documentary about this that place online and the guy that was running the first online.
Yeah.
You know, it was part of the first. Doggone it! I can't believe
Dark web. Yep. Yeah.
On whatever. All right. That on to the next news item. This week we had the GOP nominated Donald Trump as their as their presidential candidate. Nothing surprising there. Both sides, you know, it's so funny when you read the news, and like last week, all of the right-wing news outlets are like, these people are idiots. Do you hear what they're saying? This is the end of the world. And now this week it's all about, oh, those Republicans are so stupid. I can't believe what this guy said and that guy said. It's a lot of shouting. It's a lot of shouting.
There used to be a time when we could get together and discuss our differences as a nation. Yeah.
So I got one news story here that I'm probably gonna put on the back burner and see what kind of time we have. Okay. All right, two news items here, and then we'll jump into the news of the day, which I think is probably the most important news item of the week. But let's talk about Elon Musk. I love Elon.
Shocker.
Yes, I know. Two big things happened this week that are involved with Elon Musk. Number one, have you heard about all of the blackmail that's been going on with a lot of these hackers? They install malware on somebody's computer and they hack into their system, and then they blackmail the company to release their own data.
Well, yeah, I mean that's a standard, lockout.
I mean it's been prevalent recently on the news, and it all started with, you go to a website and all of a sudden you got all these pop-ups and you have to go to another website and buy a $295 software package to remove the malware on your computer, right?
Right.
Well, this has escalated to companies getting locked out of their systems and having to pay, to get access to their data. Well, a non-English speaking, non-US citizen who works for Tesla and has access to all of their networks was approached by a Soviet, someone from the prior Soviet Union, and offered $1 million to install malware on Tesla's network. Thankfully for Tesla and everybody else that's got a Tesla, and thanks. Good thing for all those people that are paying, $2,200 a share right now. The employee had some morals. He went to his supervisor. They called in the FBI and they caught the hacker. And apparently, this group they blackmailed another company for $4.5 million like 2 weeks ago. So
now, let me ask you a question. Weidman. You are your man crush, Elon Musk here for just a second.
Yeah.
What do you do for that employee? Who do you give him the $1 million? Do you give him 250,000? Do you what do you do for that employee?
I mean, I think, maybe pay him $2 million.
Right.
Like do something so big that the guy wouldn't even believe it.
Right.
Or better yet, give him 100 shares of Tesla. Like, right. That's somebody you want to keep, and that's a story that you want every single employee to hear about and know about, and and stick with you. That's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you've got something to do today at 6:00, you should probably cancel it, because today at 6:00, Neuralink is going to
I forgot about this
demonstration online, where they are going to have a live demonstration of neurons firing using their second generation robot with their Neuralink technology.
So robot hooked up to the brain, somebody thinks, and the robot moves. Is that essentially the story?
You don't even have to close your eyes and think. That's a beautiful thing. And I mean, it's pretty cool. Like they map all these neurons, and you can see in the mapping a trend. Like, if you're
really
living
cool
now,
Josh, it's really cool for nerds like you and me, dude. The average Americans, do not think that this is cool until they can actually see it, and until they can tell their phone to start playing the latest Cardi B they're not going to believe it or be interested in it.
Yep. All right. Second to last news, actually, last news story of the day. We're coming on 30 minutes here.
Yeah.
Last news story of the day, and so I don't give Judah a heart attack with the story that I wanted to run with today. Governor Wolf.
Here's the thing. Josh wanted to talk about the shooting of the most recent thing in Wisconsin. Unfortunately, the shooting on our black man, and how just that the concern is that we have an overall rush to judgment in this country for guilt, for innocence, for guilt of the victim, for guilt or innocence of the police officer. And the concern is that we are that both sides are using this to strip and eliminate liberties. And both Josh and I agree that we need to calm the heck down on all of this, I believe.
Well, it's more than that, though. I mean, my big issue with this whole argument is that it's creating a larger and larger and larger divide between two parts of our population. Right. I mean, you mentioned earlier, like we used to be able to sit down and have a political discussion without it ending in a fist fight or screaming. That doesn't happen anymore.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't happen at all. And everybody is just throwing out, sound bites at an issue that is a heck of a lot more complex, that's got a heck of a lot more moving parts, and it's very seldom black and white.
Well, and you also get entrenched into whatever it is that you believe and whatever your perspective on it is, right? So I have a tenant that I'm working with right now, and the owner wants to sell the property. She doesn't want to sell the property. I called her about when a inspection was going to be, and she started throwing out all of these race-based accusations at me. Right. And I mean, I'm almost crippled to the point that I'm like, well, how do I justify myself? And how do I? And it's just we're at this point where we can't even dialogue, and I can't even say, ma'am, no, that really has nothing to do with it. I'm a good guy, trust me. And I hear how even hollow those words sound coming out of my mouth. You know what I mean?
And think about it like this too: is that I think that some of the things that are propagated by the news media, by politicians in general, they're going to create more racists than exist. And what I mean is, look, one-on-one, we look at human beings, and most of the time we can look at each other and see the value of the individual, as opposed to when you're looking at groups of people, it becomes a rush to emotional judgment, and it's absolutely ridiculous. Anyway,
I wish the whole thing would calm down. It scares me even to talk about it as level-headedly as you and I do here, Josh, on the show, because I mean the last thing I want to do, it's what bothers me is the last thing I want to do is offend somebody and bother and therefore that makes us not even want to talk about it, which makes the issue not really go away if you can't talk about it. You know what I mean? If you can't talk about it without offending somebody, well, then you're not going to talk about it, but you also need to talk about it to solve the problem. And it's very much a big no win right now, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So, what's your last happy
story news of the day? It looks like you might be able to buy some pot sometime this fall in Pennsylvania, just for any reason. Earlier this week, Governor Wolf proposed legalizing marijuana.
Legalized recreational marijuana.
And the purpose is to offset this exorbitant cost of the COVID-19 shutdowns. I mean, it's amazing. We'll just create a whole new industry, and you probably have to order it online because you wouldn't be able to go into the store. But anyway, if the bill passes, bottom line is marijuana could be legalized in Pennsylvania and available.
It's amazing how all this recreational things are coming out right after, about 3 to 5 years after medical marijuana was passed, and there were some concerns at that point that medical marijuana was a slippery slope. It's almost like marijuana was a gateway to to medical marijuana was a gateway to recreational marijuana. I feel like I've heard that argument somewhere before, and I feel like I've been called an idiot for even referencing that argument.
Whatever. Look, if you're 21 years old, I think you should be able to do whatever the heck you want to do. I mean, within reason. If you are not infringing on the rights of somebody else, c'est la vie. Anyway, that's it.
I think that the only way that works as a society is if we step over the heroin addict, who is tripping in the street. You know what I mean? Like, but we as a society are compassionate, and we want to pay benefits and pay for medical expenses and pay for all these other things. So, what's really funny? If you're going to give up the war on drugs, you also have to give up the war on poverty, because the war on poverty becomes fiscally inconceivable if you're not also fighting a war on drugs.
Well, you know what happened in Canada when they legalized it nationally?
What?
Use of marijuana declined significantly, and all of these IPOs, these pot IPOs, they crashed and burned.
Really?
And, yeah, because they taxed it like crazy. You ever tried to buy a case of beer or a pack of cigarettes in Canada? It's like $20 for a pack of cigarettes. $20. I don't smoke, but $20 for a pack of cigarettes has a big impact, and it's because they have nationalized healthcare. It's like, we know that people that do these things have a negative impact, and so be it. It is what it is. Life goes on. Have a fantastic weekend.
Have a fantastic, happy, pot-filled weekend, everybody. And we'll see you back here on Monday.
Yeah, we'll be back Monday. Have a good one, guys. Take care.